don't think junior roles are going to go away. Frankly, I think all of these firms are looking for certain types of characteristics around. Some of the things are obvious, right? Adaptability, be able to learn fast, be able to think differently, be able to not be afraid of losing jobs, be able to have judgment, be adaptable.
Yeah.
Those things are still the same, but there's also, one of the things I look for is, have they changed the way that they work? So for example, outside their job, do they do stuff themselves to learn AI? Because in most companies, you can't do everything you can do with AI. The people who are doing it themselves and seeing what's possible, they're the people who are fantastic because they're curious. They want to go and learn new things, right? And they're going and doing it.
Yeah.
And as with most firms, the junior people of today are the senior people of tomorrow. So you might as well bring them in and teach them how to work in the new way.
100%.
Right? Because then they can permeate across the business, right? And I think that, again, there's a huge underestimation. I think it's just, as I said, an excuse. So people to say, we don't need any junior people. Like, well, you do. In terms of the tools capabilities, absolutely, they're going to have to change what I've said. Recruitment policy is what you look for, and let's be honest, firms take time to change. So if you've got a recruitment policy and you have a certain way of hiring people and think about hiring people, it's in a certain way, and they've always done it like that, not just banks in general. If you've got to rethink how you're going to hire, well, what is that rethinking? The reality is, however, is even if they hire those people, the firm isn't ready to use them. If you get them on board, when you get them on board and you've trained them, okay, well, I want to do this job that you said was going to do. Well, you can't, because the firm isn't ready. It doesn't have all the techs and capabilities, and they haven't got it, they haven't made the change, right? So part of this is the journey on how do I find people who are going to work in the new way, change the recruitment process to hire them, but also then bring an environment in which they can work in the new way, even if it's a little part of the organization. So let them work in the new way. You have a microcosm of the business doing work that way, but there's a transition. And for me, that's what firms have to think about. Say you work with AI is one thing, but actually change your work with AI and the process is going to change, or you're going to do this job rather than that job, is actually quite a hard thing to do. So there's a transition step that people are going to have to go through, and I think that's difficult. In most organizations, any transformation is really hard to do. The banks are going to have to, as I mentioned earlier, rewire themselves and how they operate, but that's hard work to change, and that's going to take time. But you've got to start now. They've got to start thinking about this now. So there's a whole bunch of new capabilities organizations need, including in regulated organizations. One of the key areas that firms need to do is what's called evaluation. So evaluation is, I've got models or I've got agents going to run, autonomous agents and execute, and I've got to make sure from a bank perspective they're going to do, what they're going to do, with what prompting, with what app, with what domain, with what outcome. You've got to prove that, because at some point the compliance team or the risk team or the regulator is going to come in and say, you made that decision and you had agents running and did it, prove it. So they generally have to prove a lot of the things they do, not necessarily externally, internally, because the reg and compliance teams are effectively the pseudo policemen of the regulator. Also redoing how you do compliance and risk. So in the current world, what happens is you have a risk team and a compliance team. Let's say you're executing a transaction. You do the transaction, you will talk to your compliance team and say, can I do this? If it's a trade, there'll be some compliance and risk stuff around it, right? And you interact with people, or maybe with the systems that give you yay or nay answers or whatever. With autonomous systems, that stuff you can't do anymore, right? It's got to have to be embedded exact in everything that you do. So you're going to have agentic systems that do compliance automatically in line and flag it up, there's a problem. A lot of the time, reg compliance and risk are friction in the process to get something done, because if you're in risk and the risk guy says, oh, you can't do this, right, there's like, I don't know, hours or days of delay because risk says no. And then you got to go back and go, well, I want to do this and this, and you iterate with it, and then eventually you might get it approved. Right? So a lot of the things that are in banks intentionally are friction to stop bad things happening.
Yeah.
The new world of friction is these agentic systems are going to do it faster, quicker, be smarter on the decision. But a lot more of it is going to be autonomous. They're going to go and do the work. Yeah. A lot of these large language model systems are probabilistic, not deterministic. What you get is the problem of how does it do something and how does it give you a result? And the reality is, if you don't build the systems around it in a way which make it more deterministic, you're going to get an output which is different every time. And also it could hallucinate, because if you don't instruct the systems properly, what do you expect? You just say, build me an app. Well, what do you expect it to do? It's like it doesn't know. Or, solve this problem. You've got to be a hell of a lot more prescriptive, but also you need to build what's called context. So I am solving a specific problem. I have to feed it the data around that problem. So it has it's called context. It has the context. You then program it doing what's called programmable prompts to say, here's what I want to know. So it's not just writing an English statement, it's writing a lot more precise. It's not a program, but it's an instruction of what you want it to do. And if you bring these things together, you can make the hallucinations near zero. The second part of that is what I've said before, which is evaluation. So before you put these systems into production, do a lot of work around eval. So LLM eval, which is, I'm going to test the model for its behavior in this context. I'm going to test it for all those scenarios to make sure that when it's doing that work, it has, it's been tested on those particular scenarios for a particular agent. And then what you have is what's called agent eval, which is, I've got a swarm of agents running, let's say an accounting process. You've got to evaluate how are these swarms of agents going to behave when they're doing the work that they're doing, and can I have a more deterministic perspective on the outcome? The other part of that is, which model do you use? So you don't want to necessarily use the biggest models out there, because however amazing these models are, and they are absolutely phenomenal, I use them every day, no model can ever do everything. And if you're doing a very specific task on a very specific thing in context of a particular organization, let's say I'm doing a credit risk assessment, you don't need a big model. The big model doesn't know anything about your data. It doesn't really know about credit risk. It probably understands it a little bit. It doesn't really know about credit risk as a case in point. But also now the cost of doing what's called fine tuning of a model is significantly lower than it was. So most banks, most large organizations, frankly, can afford to do what's called fine tuning or what's called distillation to be able to have a model contracted for that particular use case with all the other things I've described to you, so you get a hell of a lot more deterministic and a more predictable output. So these are the things you bring together. So hallucinations pretty much get solved. You can never, it's probabilistic still, right? Absolutely. But if you do the maths and the computer science and the data and the context, you can have a way better closer determinism on output that you're going to get.
Yeah.